Hi, welcome to my studio. Today we're going to be sculpting a little dragon egg. I've already taken the liberty of taking this plastic shell egg and cutting a little hole out of it. I've got it weighted down in the bottom with some material that hardens overnight. This is the Avis epoxy sculpt that we're going to be sculpting with. And I've also attached a funnel to this so that when it's all done I can pour it, make a mold and pour it. And so here we go. I'm going to put on some gloves first. I don't think that it's wise to do this with the Avis epoxy sculpt without gloves, but some people disagree. And I'm not going to do a whole lot at first. I'm just going to take a little pinch. This is part A, and in order for it to cure, you have to add it part B. You have about an hour to 3 hours of work time once you start this. I'm going to work on the shell first today, and then gradually move to the actual little head that's going to be inside the egg coming out. Now you have to mix this material thoroughly, so it takes a little bit of time. You want to get a consistent color to the material. This is the natural color. That there's several different colors that you can buy Avis epoxy sculpt in. A reason why I'm doing this one Avis epoxy sculpt instead of maybe like monster clay is because I want to have an original that survives the mold making process. I've kind of sketched out a little bit onto this egg what I'm trying to achieve. And the great thing about it, Avis epoxy sculpt, is that if you just lightly touch it, it will burnish out. It'll polish, become ultra smooth. I have one of my favorite tools. This has got a little scoop on one end and a little pointy thing on the other end. It's used in dentistry. I can't imagine for what. And you can continue to burnish this until it like it's going to be viable for quite some time. So you can continue to burnish it, polish it up. This is not really an instructional video. I just wanted to give you my thought process as I was going through it. But if you learn something, then great. If you're watching just because, you'd like to see how it's done, then great too. I watch a lot of videos that I just want to see how it's done. I get addicted to things like Ask This Old House, which has nothing to do with art, but, well, it does in a way, but it's just fun to watch. Those guys are quite crazy good at their skills. There's also a time lapse of this, so intermittently we'll just go to a time lapse to kind of speed things up, and you can see how the progress is going. I've been sculpting since I was just a kid. On again and off again. Thought for a while I wanted to do illustration work. Soon had that burned out of me. And just like doing, I went back, met someone who was a sculptor, and was introduced to the convention scene, and then a different route opened up for me where you all become my customer, my patrons, and allow me to do what I've always wanted to do. I do the dream job, Been doing this for the last 9 years full time. Now my son has joined me. My wife joined me about 2 years ago, full time, and then now my son has joined. And we go to conventions and meet you. And if you like my product and you take some of my artwork home, I much appreciate that. This is just like the faintest touch. I'm just barely touching this. Again, this is going to be an exclusive for the Patreon account. Now you can also smooth this with water, or they make a product called Avis Safety Solvent. Got an interesting pattern going there, I think. You all will have to be the final judge. I don't think even nature gets things perfect. It gets things that look interesting. A lot of times, folks, artists spend a lot of time trying to get everything perfectly symmetrical. Sometimes that is cool. I mean, because after all, we find symmetrical things attractive, but nothing is perfect in nature. And sometimes when we try to do the perfect in our artwork, it looks a little funny. I think that's one of the reasons why when you sculpt with like ZBrush or whatever, and it perfectly mirrors the opposite of what you're doing on the other side, it has a tendency to look a little artificial, a little too contrived, a little too perfect. And then our eyes go, not real. No danger of me getting it perfect, I tell you that much. This is already left Perfectville a long time ago. A lot of my artwork is insanely detailed, as some of you know, or accuse me of. But, and then it's like, oh, I couldn't do that, it'd drive me nuts, or whatever. I hear that comment a lot. But for me, it's just calming. It's like meditation. Calms me down. Now, as we head down to the other side of this, I can just adjust my vise a little bit. When I say that Avis Epoxy Sculpt cures in an hour or so, hour, 3 hours, people get like, oh, I couldn't work like that. But actually, it's not if you're just working with little pieces at a time, it's not that stressful. You don't even think about it being a factor. My fellow sculptor and friend Mark Helwig is the one that put me onto these great ball joint vices. Very helpful. Most of what I've learned, I've picked up from trial and error and fellow artists. I do continue to try a lot of things. New product on the market, I try it. Some are good, some are not so good. I'm going to do a comparison. Smooth On has a sculpting product that's like this, and so does Magic Sculpt, and there's even a variation of this product from Avis called Avis Epoxy Clay, which I've worked with too, and I like, but I keep coming back to this Avis Epoxy Sculpt, and so I think I'm going to do a comparison, side-by-side comparison, maybe do a few experiments as to what kind of strength each has. I look forward to that in a future video. Also doing a lot of videos that you can join in on to learn instructional videos like wand making, and I'll think of a few other projects that we can possibly tackle that's not terribly difficult and good for beginners. Actually, I mean, if you wanted to, I mean, there's no real sculpting here other than just pattern making on the side of the clay of the egg. So you could try to be doing one of these, you know, without the. You don't necessarily have to have the little dragon coming out of the egg. Just make an egg with a pattern on it. You could do it with scales. You could do it like I'm doing it with these. I don't know what these are really called, but they're kind of like scales. Pattern you find sometimes on lizards. Now, what will happen when I make this mold for this egg is that this last of the funnel area down here, I will cut off and then sand down. Thought about doing just a rotocasting egg. That way you would have a seam, but this should have only one seam with any indication that it is cast, and then hopefully that can be sanded down pretty smoothly. So I'll do a cut mold, which means that I will completely encase it in silicone, and then I will take a X-Acto and cut one side and free it from its mold. I'll videotape that too, so you can see what I have in mind. All right, there's the first pattern. I'll come down the side of this with another grouping of stuff. Let's see, I think I'll do a little small dab of it in between these little seams. Beginning to shine. Let's put suppose you could cover the whole thing and then try to tool this into it, but I don't think you could achieve the same look. It's not going to be as, I don't know, what am I looking for? As organic looking. It'll look like you imposed a pattern on it. I wanted this to look really organic. You could do an egg like the Game of Thrones egg, you know, it's all scales, but I don't know, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make it look, I wanted a different look for it. Scales are for the dragon itself. Now, the other thing to think about too is that this will harden overnight, and so I will have to be cautious when I'm gripping the egg for the other side. When I'm sculpting the other side, it'll just be solid. And I might be able to take off the egg off the vise and work on the bottom half of it. But I like that. That's looking pretty good. Let's do the other side. My next convention is Capricorn in Chicago, Wheeling, Illinois, north side of Chicago. It's a literary science fiction convention. It's been running for a number of years. All fan-based run. I enjoy those. Those are fun. It's not a big convention. And you can get a chance to talk to whoever you want to talk to. I mean, whoever the guest is, whoever the artists are, the writers. Well, I mean, it's nice. So if you're looking for a little bit calmer experience, or a place where you can meet people for the first time to play a game or something, and you're intimidated by the bigger conventions, try one of these small conventions. It's calmer. I don't want these conventions to go away. I want them to still have a vital part to play. Again, I'm just barely touching this egg to burnish it and to make it really, really smooth. And you can see that it's beginning to have a shine to it just by barely touching it. But then I have to go back and I have to separate out my seams our different lines for the scales so that everything looks distinct. Okay, I think I'm going to call it quits for this session. Session 1, end of session 1. And so I'm calling it quits at this point.